What's going on, everybody? We got a Z build today, engine overhaul. The water came from the crankcase. Good times. Good times. You. That's gross. So with that being said, we start the disassembly. We're going to rip off the flywheel and pull the stator out and get her going. Let me know if you hear the click when this thing breaks loose. Going to be mixing in some high speed for you. That way you can actually see the process and slow it down and stop it if you need, and actually see what it takes to rebuild one of these things. Clutch basket stuck. You can actually hear the plates and the suction because they're glued together. This is what happens when you put them together dry and then put oil in the motor. They glue themselves to the metal plates.
First off, it's glued together. Ooh. Crunchy. You hear that? Glued together.
This is very typical. I've seen it a million times.
Makes you wonder if that choice of fluid had anything to do with it.
That's pretty rusty.
The choice of fluid question from Tony was because we had discussed earlier about different motor oils that you can use in these two-strokes. And this one in particular had gear oil in it, like 90-weight gear oil.
Actually, I should have done this with the plates in, but that's okay. I love gear oil in the morning. Oh my God, differential fluid stinks.
Alright, so we get into splitting the cases. Pull all the bolts out. I don't have a case splitter. I've never had a case splitter. I've been doing this 35 plus years and never used a case splitter. You put the longest two bolts back in the holes, one on one side of the crank, one on the other side of the crank, one at the end of the motor. Get an extension on it with a socket, whack it with a hammer, and be done with it. Don't worry about setting things up and hooking into whatever, however, just whack it a few times, it comes apart. That last hit put a nice separation in the cases. Now you take everything out, wiggle it around a little bit. Wiggling is key. Make sure that the shifter's in the right spot. That star has to fit through that case half, so it's got to be in a specific point. Wiggle it some more and lift. If it looks like the transmission's sticking to one side, not the other side, flip it over and pull the other side. Make sure you got all the pieces parts out of it, and go ahead. Whoop, right, there you go. Reach in, you pull out the shift forks, transmission, everything all in one swoop. Got the clutch rod and the input shaft. There's also a bearing up against that clutch rod. Don't lose it. Make sure you catch it. Use the butt end of a hammer if the crank gets stuck in the case half. Tap it a few times. It'll pop out. If you really need to, throw it in a press. Considering the condition of some of the motors that I've put together, this thing came apart rather cleanly. Looked like it was in rather good shape. Really can't complain. The cylinder needed a little bit of help because it had some water in it, but that honed out rather nice. A 70mm bore, so can't go any bigger. Got to re-sleeve it and start over again after this. After you've gone through and replaced the bearings, replaced the seals, cleaned everything out, and got it all ready to reassemble, you put the transmission gears back in it. You got to be careful you don't drop the inner spacer. That is an oil spacer. It's got the grooves on the inside of it. Make sure that stays in place. Put the shift forks in. The lower shift fork needs to go in with the shift drum. Make sure it's in the lower spot. Those worm grooves in there guide the shift forks to make sure that you're in the correct gear. So once you get everything all lined up, you fought with it a little bit, called it some names, put the pins back in it, goop up the other side of the case half, drip a little bit of goop on the first case half, put her all together. Final little pop says it's seated. Throw the bolts all in it, crank them down. Alright, here we're removing and replacing the shift detent, because when you put it back together it ends up pointing down at the bottom of the case. You gotta take it off, put it back in, reset it so that it's actually hugging the notches in the shift drum. Crank it all back down, make sure that the stay spring's in there, throw the shifter in there, and now you should be able to shift it. An idler gear that works off the kicker. That goes straight to the back of the clutch basket. Little clip holds that in place. Snap ring. Main gear off the crank goes on. Crank had a little burr in the threads, so I had to sit down with a file and clean it up a little bit. Got to be patient with these things. Fix anything as you come across it, because it'll bite you in the butt later if you don't. Usually if there's a little doink in there, it just takes a fine little file. You chase the threads around a little bit. Nice, gently. Be kind of tedious with it. Brute strength and ignorance at this point in time does not apply, that's for sure. When you put the kicker gear in, you need to make sure that the stop is where it needs to be, and the piece that holds the gear in place is also in its little slot that's in the case cover. Then you wrap the little tension spring around, put it in its hole, and put the clutch in place. Stack the plates like they need to be. Put the nut on, put a little pressure on the plates to hold the center hub in place. Crank it down with the air gun. Flip the stop tab up on the washer. Make sure you put the pressure plate on correctly because you can put that on wrong. If it's not sitting flush, move it over a spot. Put all the screws in place, run them down by hand. Go about halfway all the way around and then drop them down, bottom them out. Give them a very slight ooga-dooga. Those towers will break off. You pull too hard on that thing. It's old, it's brittle. You don't want to break it. Stator goes on. The way I set the stator on these things is when you put the screw in, the washer gets just a little bit of a peek hole. We're talking the screw on the right-hand side. I give the washer just a little bit of a look through the gap on top. So you're pretty much advanced quite a bit. Crank it down. Make sure the keyway is in place. Flywheel on. Washer nut. Hit it with a gun. Hold the crank with your hand so that it doesn't spin. Always hold the crank with your hand. That way you can hit it with the gun and it doesn't spin. And you're not going metal on metal. You might bleed a little bit sometimes, but it's better you hurt your hand than you hurt the cases or the rod or the motor or something like that. Putting this clip in place. Make sure you put the piston pin in, run the clip up against it, go in there with a pick and drop it down into the slot. Give it a little double check with the pick. Now, I dip the bearing directly in two-stroke oil. That's the piston pin bearing. Stuff it in the hole, well lubed, good to go. Lube up the pin too a little bit. I use my pinky to guide it in the rod. Push it all the way through. Let me put the clip on that side. Careful, don't. We call these Jesus clips. If they go flying, good luck finding it. If you can find it, you're a miracle worker. I'll just give you that much. Once you get it in place, double check it with the pick so it doesn't fall out. You either want the gap facing up, gap facing down. You do not want the gap facing to the side. That gives a risk that on one of the up or down strokes it can pop out, and that will cause catastrophic failure, destruction of your piston and your sleeve. Careful when you put the rings on. Give them a little dab of two-stroke oil, spin them around some, get that oil down in there so that they float free and they're pre-lubed. Sometimes I'll even put two-stroke oil on the cylinder itself. Sometimes I won't. It all depends on how I'm feeling that day. It doesn't really matter one way or another. Careful with the rings. Slide it on. Keep everything all straight. Little pop. That goes in place. Steel head gasket. Do not use Cometic composite gaskets. They're garbage. That's why this thing's in here in the first place. They blow out. Also, the Z is notorious for going loose on the stud that's right above the exhaust port. So you want to keep an eye on that also. This isn't something you can set and forget. You got to go back and check this stuff every once in a while. Crank everything all down. Pretty much good to go. Stator cover, nice pretty billet, new gasket, Now it's time to fix the clutch cover that was broken. Try Z, you cannot just jump on the Kickstarter. You can't free kick it. If there's slopping in Kickstarter and you jump on it too many times, you will break the clutch cover. You need to roll it over by foot, find the middle between the two humps, get all the slack out of the kicker as high up as you can, and jump on that thing, and then reset it. If not, you crack the clutch cover, and then, well, I kind of thank you for being the way you are. Send me the clutch cover. I'll weld it all back up for you. I'll repowder coat it, and send it back to you all fixed. I do these things all the time. It happens, quite common. And it seems how you can't find these things, or if you do find it, you're going to pay $300-400 for one. Yeah. Cheaper to pay $100-200 to have it fixed. So we go in there with a Dremel, we chase the crack. We already pre-drilled the crack, the end of the crack, so it doesn't go any further. Go in with a Dremel, relieve it some so I get full penetration all the way through to the backside. I do actually weld both sides, inside, outside, all around, about side, because they crack all over the place. You chase the cracks and just put weld everywhere you can, and then just machine it all back out afterwards. Here I'm welding the back side of the cover. Pretty blue light. I'm sure my iPhone likes that. Go out to the front side of the cover. Buzz and the pretty lights. A lot of this stuff is real fixable. I fix cases too. Case halves that are blown out, crank goes bad or something, and you crack the case half. Yep, those can be welded also. Any aluminum components on these motors can be welded and fixed. Patience, you'll know how. All ground down, pretty, even, save the Y. Sometimes you lose the Y and they become Yamahas. This one's still a Yamaha. Fine details, get that rough spot off with the file. That's a nice square file, gives me a nice clean edge. All fixed. All together, painted. Fun of carrying these heavy motors over. Take spark plug out. Can't put it in with spark plug in it. I put spark plug in to protect the hole, but yeah, can't put the motor in with spark plug in it. If you can, you're gonna bang the spark plug a half a dozen times. Probably crack it in the process. So just don't have the spark plug in. Spin it around. These motors, if you don't know, these motors go through the swing arm pivot bolt goes through the motor. Some motors, engines, whatever you want to call them. Hit me with a technicality if you want. The motor's electrical. Yes, I understand that. Either way, pivot bolt goes through the engine. It's not like a 250R where you can pull the engine without removing the pivot bolt. Slide it into place, put all the bolts in, put the hoses in, hook all the electronics up, fun. Do some fast forwarding through this process. Get it all hooked up, fired up, good to go. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, go ahead and hit that like button too. Slap it around a little bit. Every like helps push out the videos. We can get these videos out to as many people as we can. We got the subscriber count. We need the video watch time. So there's going to be more build videos coming in. You guys don't know what you're doing, or you do know what you're doing and you want to critique my builds, go ahead. Throw a comment in there, tell me what you think. If you appreciate the video, I appreciate you. If you don't appreciate the video, well, I appreciate you watching it anyways. This is what I do alongside of breeding fish and making music. You got any questions about builds or got problems with something that you got at home, let me know. See if we can help you out. Either make a video or I'll catch you in the comments. Y'all have a great day. And stay tuned for this thing to be running.
$1,050 cc's. One of these and a little bit of another one. Really bad when Maxima actually acts like oil. You know it's cold. And I'm going to go 150 cc's. It's literally never this thick.